This podcast is made possible through donations from listeners like you and our partners at Goalie Ashwa Gummies. You can find them at goalie.com. Use promo code the Show Up Dad Foundation to get 10% off your order. Zenderance Active Wellness and Sports Nutrition. Their products are designed to maximize your health. As Zenderance, they strive to support and have a positive impact on the wellness of every hardworking dad. Use my code the Show Up Dad and get 10% off your next purchase. For more info, go to www.zenderance.com. Tall Man Equipment. Standing taller than the rest of the competition in lineman tools since 1952. Give them a follow at www.tallmanequipment.com. And last but not least, Adam Lane Smith. He is an attachment specialist who helps people to heal, connect, and build. Use my promo code SHOW, spelled SHOW, for a 50% discount on his attachment bootcamp course. Thank you. Welcome to the Show Up Dad, the podcast where we explore the joys and challenges of fatherhood with real dads. I'm your host, David, and today we have a special guest, John Christensen. He is the author of Village Wisdom, which is 6 dads' reflections on lessons learned. John is also an Army veteran, a whiskey fan, and a poker player. He is also a high-functioning nerd who never takes life too seriously, except when it comes to being a dad. John joins us from Iola, Texas, to share the insights on fatherhood and the lessons he learned along the way. So sit back, relax, and let's dive into the world of fatherhood with John on the Show Up Dad. Thanks for joining us today, brother.
Thanks, David. I'm glad to be here.
Absolutely, dude. No, I saw your post. You had some really interesting posts. And, you know, one of the things we say at the Show Up Dad is a lot of us never had a blueprint or anything like that to fatherhood, right? And fatherhood can be hard. It can be challenging, but it's also very rewarding. So that's why I was interested in bringing you on, because you saw the same thing and you decided to get different insights from all these different fathers and put them in a book, kind of like a blueprint for guys that don't have it, right?
Right, for sure.
Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself, how you became an Army veteran, an author, and all that stuff, if you don't mind, brother?
Yeah, totally. So, I guess it all starts with the Army. Before I joined the Army, I was struggling with life, man. I didn't know it at the time. I didn't know the definition. I certainly didn't know the impact, but I was depressed. I was doing things that me as a father, 20 years down the road would not approve of. And so it started out with me helping a friend and in that instant kind of recognizing just how good it felt to help somebody. And, I remember, kind of like marinating on that a bit. And so, at the time my life was going nowhere as it was. And so I found myself in a recruiter's office, and really the only reason I joined the Army over like the Marines was because the Army offered a sign-on bonus. So like how superficial and shallow is that? But yeah, I still to this day, I credit the Army not only with shaping me into the person that I am today, but also essentially saving my life. Who knows where I would have ended up had it not been for the Army. But through the Army, and really any military service, it breaks you down in like basic training and stuff. They break you down so they can build you up, type deal.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened with me. And they cracked a shell that nobody else could, and developed me into the man and prospective father and husband that I would become today. And so it's really interesting because I recently came across a post actually on Instagram or somewhere, but it was essentially stating like the person that you are today is the person that you would have felt safe with as a kid. And man, that made me like think, that's a brain burner.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I did the Army thing, met my wife, and eventually became a father a couple years after leaving the military. And as far as the book, I started kind of doing some soul searching. I was thinking about ways to escape the 9-to-5 so that I could see my kids more. At the time I was working, 30 or 40 minutes away from the kids' school, and it was a struggle to get to like kids' events, like their award shows and field trips and all like the daily ins and outs of what happens at the school. And so kind of started thinking about like what I could do to be more present in my kids' lives, on a daily
Hmm.
basis. And so I started journaling about it. I didn't feel really comfortable going to any friends. It was just kind of like the typical dad thing, just kind of like shut up and do your dad work, but nobody
Yeah.
really understands what that dad work is. And so I started journaling, man, and I figured that after a year or so, I'd have enough. And I've always kind of had this bucket list item to author my own book.
Yeah.
And so, through journaling, I just kind of figured I'd print out, a full year's worth, 300 plus pages of journals, and offer it to my son at some point. I just thought it would be so, I mean, how amazing would that be to read your own parents' or grandparents' journal?
Yeah.
And yeah, so I literally got about halfway through my first journal entry and felt this like wave of selfishness like just crash over me.
Uh-huh.
And I knew some other dads that I was really close with, and I was like, I'm just, and I'm typically an introvert. I am an introvert, an internal introvert, but it took a lot of humility and vulnerability to reach out to some other dads that I knew that were really good at dadding. And I reached out to them and said, hey, you guys interested in writing a book with me, leaving something that can potentially leave a legacy for, our kids. And, I look at it as our kids because we are a village, it's, they say it takes a village to raise a kid, and I couldn't be more of a champion for that. And
Yeah.
so to my I don't know if I was surprised or what, but almost instantly everybody signed on. I mean, there's six of us, so I say everyone. There was only five other dads that I reached out to, but still, they all signed on. And we were all dedicated to churning this thing out. And I'll tell you, like, it was it's it's fascinating, to kind of understand your own perspective is one thing, but to understand five other perspectives on the same travelings and the path that you're headed down,
Hmm.
it's mind-blowing. And so it's really, the book ended up being, I don't want to call it a manual to fatherhood, but it almost is. It's just like kind of like guidance and something that you wish you had when you started the journey as a dad.
Yeah, for sure. No, and it's so important to write things down. I had a past guest, Kemp Brewer, who came on, and he's the author and creator of Legacy Letters, right? And his goal is to help fathers write these letters to their sons, right? And
Awesome.
he discussed how his father passed away, right? And his dad was a very influential in his life. He was a tight end who played with Terry Bradshaw, right?
Wow.
And at Louisiana Tech. And so his dad was very well known. He's a very well likable guy. They go to Hawaii. Needless to say, his dad winds up drowning on him, and he couldn't save him
Wow.
because his dad was such a big man. But on his way to the hotel, when they're cleaning up and they're still trying to wrap their brain around what had happened during that traumatic incident, right? His mom's like packing up his dad's stuff because, like I said, they're on a vacation. Some
Wow.
letters fall out, right? And they got him. They open him up, and he starts reading it. And it's a letter from his dad to his son, talking about how proud he was of him and all these different things that us as sons need to hear, right?
Sure. Absolutely.
And he started on this mission to help people write these letters to their own sons. So what I'm getting at is that the importance of writing things down, I mean, you never know how much that's going to cascade down throughout the ages.
uh, it's huge, when you hear about like these people that lose their parents, and they have like voicemails right on their phone, and they listen to them like on a daily or a weekly basis just to hear their voice. Like, I'm sure the people that do that couldn't even tell you what the substance of the message is. It's just hearing the voice that's so paramount. And part of that can be found in a podcast, right? I mean, can you
Mm-hmm.
imagine that the smile that this podcast is going to bring to our kids' lives one day? It's crazy. And kind of along those lines,
Mm-hmm.
I met my wife about 15 years ago, and she's always talked about this one Christmas video. She
Hmm.
was, 4, 5, 6 years old at Christmas,
Uh-huh.
and an uncle was filming, those big like missile launcher VHS tape recorders,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
he was filming the whole Christmas with her and her brother and some family members and her parents. Well, my wife was a complete orphan by the time that she was 13, lost
Uh,
both of her parents, and some heart trouble. And, she's always talked about this video. And for Mother's Day, we woke up and she had a Google Drive link in her email. And one
mhm.
of her cousins had found the video and had it digitized in like an MP4 or whatever, and
Yeah,
sent it to her. And so like we watched it, and it was an hour long of getting to hear, I've never met her parents, and
yeah.
surely she can't possibly remember that much from that long ago. But it was just amazing just to hear their voices and see their faces, uh, from that. And for me to see my wife as like a 4 or 5 year old kid, it was just crazy. But it's, the legacy that we're able to leave, such as those letters to dad or letters from dad,
Mhm.
man, it's just remarkable. It's amazing. And I think it really does something to your soul, by being
Mhm.
able to connect in that way.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Now, you told us about how what inspired you. What are you hoping that your readers will take away from it?
Yeah. So, one of the really, I think this is possibly the most interesting aspect of the book, is that it's kind of like interactive in a sense
Okay.
that it spawned from like this necessity, this weird urge to journal, right? And so we
Mhm.
started responding to prompts. But the really interesting aspect that we added was intentionally blank pages between chapters or
Okay.
responses, so that the reader can answer the responses in their own handwriting and then pass that book down generationally to their kids.
Mhm.
And so, because I couldn't shake the idea that I really want to read my dad's journal, and I don't think my dad has a journal, but I would love to just know his like inner thoughts, like, the questions that nobody would ever think to ask,
Yeah.
and that's some of the questions that we answered. But being able to, potentially see your grandfather's handwritten words on a page, like I can't think of anything more, significantly impactful to, your soul as a lineage, a family member of somebody that's come,
Mhm.
years after, generations after you. It's just a really cool aspect, and it's just something that,
Mhm.
obviously the readers of the book will take away like the stories and some of the vulnerability, and hopefully be more open and transparent in their own lives. But if they're able to leave that, generational wisdom for their future generations, I hope they do so.
Man, you just talking about that, right? And your vision for, it being interactive. That's amazing. That's mind blowing, dude. Because me thinking back, I would have loved to hear my great grandfather who traveled from the Azore Islands of Portugal as a whaler
Ugh,
to the United States at 14 years old, right? I would
dude.
love to hear what he went through, what he experienced, you know, um, and just seeing even let's go back to just even my dad, dude, because we have this way of looking at our dads through a certain light, through a certain lens, right?
Yeah,
And I would love to see what my dad's fears were, why he acted a certain way. And it would give me more of a perspective of him as a person, right? Versus just knowing and being taught and being shown certain things from him. I would love to see the drive behind it, the why behind it, and be like, okay, that makes sense now. You know what I'm saying? So
for
this is
sure.
deep, dude.
Oh yeah, I mean that's the goal of this. And one of
Hmm.
the things that we've really, and I'll tell you, like in writing this, I didn't want to introduce any potential for like bias in my own writing, so I kind of like
Yeah.
organized the whole thing and sent out all the questions to all the other 5 dads. But I had to make sure that each of the dads was kind of like following along with the prose. I didn't want one dad writing a couple sentences and another dad writing like 50 pages a day.
Yeah.
So and I really didn't want to read their writing either. And I suppose, like, in hindsight, the Monday morning quarterback in me could have had my wife read them and just make sure that they were good. But at the time, like, I just had to know what they wrote. And so I read the first entry from each dad, and it was absolutely mind-blowing just seeing how vulnerable these dads could be in their responses.
Hmm.
Um, and so at that point, like, I resolved to myself that I wouldn't read anymore until it came time to, like, edit,
Yeah.
and I'll tell you, like, in editing, I was just absolutely blown away. So, like, fast forward to the day that the books arrive, and I'm not much of an emotional dude. I cried when my kids were born. I cried when I lost somebody in combat in Iraq. But outside of that, like, I just always kind of grew up in a world where dudes don't cry. You suck it up, you man up, and you push on.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, those books were slotted to. I got the email from UPS, like, they're coming, they're going to be here in an hour type deal. And so I grabbed a beer and I'm sitting on the tailgate of my wife's truck, just waiting for this UPS driver to come up. And he shows up, he drops the six boxes off, and it took me about half an hour
Hmm.
to dry up my eyes to walk in the house, just because I was so proud of what we had built.
Yeah.
And the very first book I pulled out of that box, I gave to my wife, and I was like, "Hey, you have to read this." And she knew what I was doing, and she had read through some of the book in editing, but she hadn't read through all of it. And so I gave it to her, and the next morning she was like, "I have some questions," and this is a woman that I have shared a dinner table with, I've shared a bed with, I've shared children with, our careers with. I've known her for 15 years of my life, and she learned something about me through this book. And
Wow.
so, like, imagine, like, learning something about your father, or your son learning something about you, or your daughter learning something about you that you've shared an entire lifetime with. And it's just it literally blows me away every day.
Mhm.
And I still, I get text messages and screenshots and pictures from readers across the country, and it's the best when it's
Mhm.
somebody that I've never met, I have no connection with, and they're like, "Oh my God, like, this is amazing." And it's that feeling that keeps me going with this thing.
Yeah, for sure. Because you're really training yourself to be vulnerable too and open, right?
Yeah, and it's something that,
Transparent,
yep.
you know?
And as dads, like, we're not, I think the traditional and more conservative approach is that, like, we're not supposed to be,
Mm.
like, we're supposed to be, open and transparent with ourselves, maybe our spouse, and maybe a little bit with, like, family members, but outside of that, like, we're just not. And so
Mhm.
I'm hoping that this kind of, well, really, I hope this just shatters that glass and just allows parents to come out, and we also, over the past couple of weeks, we've started with the mom's edition. So
Mm.
we're going to drop that in a few months, but I cannot wait to read through that.
No, yeah, for sure, for sure. No, and you're absolutely right. I don't know why we have this stigma as men to where we have to seem like we have it all together. I think that's leading to a tremendous amount of stress already on us that we were never
Yep,
meant to carry, right? And
absolutely.
I firmly believe. Now, I'm not any type of professional or anything like that, but I firmly believe that that's led to a lot of unwarranted deaths and suicides.
For
Just that
sure.
added stress, of not being able to talk, to put on this facade that, hey, man, I can't let anybody know that something's going on with me,
Oh,
that I don't
absolutely.
have it together. You know what I'm saying?
You
So it's
know,
good you created this.
yeah, one of our co-authors, Casey, he is
Hmm.
a recovering alcoholic. I think he's year 12 or year 13.
Hmm.
And we got to talking not too long ago about how, like, to what's going to happen when a dad that's in similar shoes, that hasn't had the platform to kind of speak his piece about this kind of stuff,
Hmm.
that is an alcoholic and is fighting alcoholism. uh because, and that's typically, like, if my son sees me start to write, he's going to start to write. If he sees me work out, he's going to start to work out. If my
Right.
son sees me drinking every night, guess what he's probably going to do when he hits 21?
Hmm.
And so if there is a single dad out there uh, that is going through it like this, and his son can read about his struggle, his story, and how he's defeating the monster that is alcoholism, you know, could this book potentially save that kid's life? And like, my hair again is standing up on my arms. I just,
Mm,
I don't know. I'm hoping, if I could snap my fingers and alcoholism could be completely erased from humanity, I'd do it 10 times over. But the
mm,
reality is it's always going to be there. Um, but if this book can do anything to defeat that, man, I mean,
mm.
what a reward.
No, for sure. And the repercussions, like you're saying, you don't know where they're going to end. It's like dropping a stone in a pond, right? And
Yeah,
those ripples keep going and going and growing and growing and growing. We don't know how it's going to affect. I mean, it could have a tsunami effect on the other end for good, right?
absolutely.
So no, it's really cool that you're doing that, man. And I'm glad that guys like you, guys like Clint are coming up with these books, these letters to write, because that's one of the things that I tell in our coaching that we have for fathers is like, man, write a journal down,
Yeah,
start having these morning reflections of
yeah,
gratitude. What are you thankful for? What are your biggest fears?
yeah,
Stuff like that, and write them down, jot them down. That way they become visual. They're not just sitting in the back of your head. When you have them written down, then you can start creating a plan to overcome them. You know what I'm saying?
absolutely. The weight of those thoughts in your mind
Mm-hmm.
is the heaviest that it'll ever be. You
Mm-hmm.
can, I don't care if you can bench 500 pounds and squat 1,000. If you can't get those thoughts out of your mind, you're in for a tough time. And so, being able to, like you said, write them out and formulate, an attack plan to defeat them.
Mm-hmm.
There's no better way.
For sure, for sure. Now you describe yourself as a whiskey loving, poker playing, high functioning nerd, right?
Yeah.
How do these interests influence you when you're writing your outlook on life, brother?
Yeah, the whiskey part I've really kind of given up over the past year. The occasional drink I'll indulge in if it's been a tough week at work,
Mm-hmm.
but I think everybody kind of has their vices. My wife is stuck on that Starbucks, the caramel macchiato,
Mm-hmm.
and the poker playing I think is very similar. One of our dads, Javier, he's all about chess, and I think it's that strategic kind of mindset that comes from game theory. And there's there's a big push now to get kids off of Call of Duty and Fortnite and Minecraft, and I'm all for it. I don't think kids should be spending as much time on screens. Back in
Yeah.
the day, if you're anything like me, we were running around with sticks in the woods playing army and manhunt, and there's just not enough of that in the world today. And granted, things have kind of changed, and the world is a little bit smaller than what it once was. But
Mm-hmm.
I think by introducing those games where you have to be strategic in your movement, think that helps develop you as a person to be more strategic in your pursuit of happiness as life goes on. And so I think that's really helped. I think
Mm-hmm.
poker has kind of opened the doors for discovering what's practical in life, much as
Mm-hmm.
in like the traditional education system where you learn about like trigonometry and calculus and God forbid should I mention discrete math where there's no actual numbers. It's all like letters and symbols and hieroglyphics.
Yeah.
But it's not, in those moments it's not about the math.
Mm-mm.
Nobody cares if you learn, very few people care about the diameter or the circumference of a circle, and I certainly don't need that in my day to day.
Mm-hmm.
But it's about the process of learning. And so if my son can learn to be strategic by playing Call of Duty or Minecraft, then I'm all for it. I'm against him playing 4 or 5 hours a day, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
but gaming, like poker, and like technology, and just kind of, figuring out the puzzles of tech. I think that really helps improve your life.
Mhm.
And it's something, I think, not necessarily to be shunned, but something to be championed.
No, I can't agree more with you, and I'll give you a perfect example. I'm also a lineman instructor at Cal Nevada JATC, where we help raise the next generation. And one of the biggest transitions I see from apprentice to journeyman lineman, right, is the hurdle that they have to overcome is being able to stop thinking like an apprentice and start thinking like a journeyman lineman. And I mean by seeing the big picture, right?
Yeah.
A lot of these guys as apprentices have been told what to do throughout 3 4 years, right? Always
Right.
guiding their training, guiding, right?
Yeah.
Well, the very next day when they top out or a week later, all of a sudden you're expected to know what to do, right? They need to get out of that mind frame of just going through the process and start applying what you've learned, right? So that's
Right.
the biggest hurdle. So it's that critical thinking part that they need to start developing, right? We've already
Yep.
shown them the way, but now they got to start thinking on their own. And that's what I always tell them. I was like, you guys got to see the big picture. And I think games like chess, um, seeing the big picture, seeing 4 or 5 steps past what's going on, not
Yeah.
just getting that tunnel vision where you're so focused right here at this problem where you can't see how that focus is going to have a ripple effect 4 or 5 steps down the road. I mean,
Absolutely.
in life, we have to be able to see that.
Yeah.
We can't get so focused on what is happening right here. We have to be able to take a step back. And I liken that to having a camera and you zoom out and you zoom out and you zoom out.
Yeah.
And that's what I describe to my apprentices. That's what I describe to even my family, because I take life lessons from what I teach at my apprenticeship as a lineman, as a journeyman lineman, what I have been shown, what my father's been shown, what other fathers had showed me. And I try to utilize that information, kind of like what you're doing in your book, with everybody I come across, because I believe firmly that our mess is our message.
Sure.
And you
Yeah.
can learn something from anybody, even if it's not how to do something, right?
Ex- exactly. And all too often, and especially with social media, we seek out the affirmations. We
Hmm.
seek out those thoughts from others that align exactly with how we think.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't align, then we don't like that person, or we don't like that concept. But if you zoom out and no better metaphor has been spoken. If
Hmm.
you zoom out and you can visualize the context of a decision point, and understand that, the context for that decision point
Hmm.
affects decision points later on down the road. And if it's something that somebody says that doesn't necessarily agree with your perspective of the world, there's still
Hmm.
something to be learned from that. Even if
Yeah.
it's reaffirming what you thought, then great. If it's
Hmm.
not, then what's their evidence or thought process behind what they're
Hmm.
saying or what they're presenting. And yeah, throughout the book, there's a religious element in it.
Hmm.
And there's just a lot of different aspects on how to raise a kid, man.
Yeah.
And that alone has so many different elements and so many different angles. And the coolest part about it is that none of it's wrong. Like, yeah, obviously, beating your kids or talking down to them or bullying them, that's obviously wrong. But those kinds of
Hmm.
people don't write books. And honestly, they probably don't read books. And had they read books, they probably wouldn't be the way they are.
Hmm.
um and so that's what kind of comes down to parenting. Like, we mentioned video games, but my kids read like nobody's business. They read menus. It's talked about in the book, but they order from them for themselves at restaurants. We don't speak for them. They
Yeah.
tell us how they feel, and we talk through those feelings. And when we tell them no, it's never because I said so. We always give them the context of, this is why we said no, or this is why we said yes. I think you have to be just as descriptive with yes as you are no, and make sure that they understand the reasons behind those decisions.
No, I can't agree with you more, bro. absolutely have to have our yeses be yes and our nos be no, and explain the why behind it.
Yep.
You
Yep.
know, I see a lot of fathers, and I'm guilty of this myself, to where I tell them because, right?
Yep.
And then finally, I had to stop, take a step back, zoom out, like I said, and I had to really explain to them. I started thinking, I was like, well, why are they questioning me? And I didn't, at the time, I was taking offense to it. I was like, I'm the dad. You should just listen to me, right? And we take
Yeah.
offense to it, right? Because now all of a sudden, now a man's deepest need is to be respected, right? And then I started allowing that to trigger me, and now I'm disrespected, and now I'm gonna get angry, and all this other stuff, right? But then I had to really step back, zoom out, and look at it and be like, okay, they obviously are asking me why, because they don't understand, and then I had to think in a different perspective. They're kids. They are kids. And foolishness is stored up in the heart of a child. I had to remember that, right?
Yeah.
That's a scripture in the Bible. So when fathers get upset and they're like, why did you do this? Or they can't understand why I did that. Well, just, this isn't something that just happened. It clearly states in the Bible, like you're saying, read, that
Yeah.
foolishness is stored up in the heart of a child. So your kid is going to do childish, foolish things. And it's up to us to discipline them, right? Which is course correction, to help them to understand not to do that again. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And we as dads,
Mm-hmm.
need to explain our why. But these kids, like I have a 7 and a 9-year-old,
Mm-hmm.
and they're going through spelling bees and they're learning how to spell the word environment, and they struggle with it. And you know, if there's a silent P like pseudonym, I mean, good night. It's that word is done.
Oh, yeah.
But they don't have the words, the tools to articulate themselves. And so much like we need to understand and convey our why, it's our duty to pull from them their why. Why did you knock this milk over on the counter and not clean it up? It's
Mm-hmm.
not because they don't know where the paper towels are. It's because they don't know the importance of cleaning up milk so we don't get
Mm-hmm.
ants, so the ants don't bring mice, and um just kind of extrapolating from their perspective
Mm-hmm.
on the decisions that we and they make. It's important, and it's even more important that we assist them on that journey, because they don't have, they feel the same emotions that we feel. When they pop out from mom, they understand love, and we help refine and define that. But they
Mm-hmm.
understand all of the emotions. They just don't understand the language, and the language is man-made. Nobody comes out, knowing how to read, and
Yeah.
so, or how to talk. And so by us kind of, digging at their why, I think that only enriches the relationship.
No, I can't agree more with you, brother. You hit the nail right on the head on that one, man. So back to your book, right? Now, we discussed how it teaches on the importance of fatherhood, right?
Yeah.
Can you tell us about your own experience as a father and how they influenced your writing and your point of view on that portion of the book that you wrote?
Yeah. So, man, I got two stories for this. So, one of which, we were 3 or 4 days in. So, how we kind of like formatted this book is that, it was almost like a New Year's resolution. It just so happened to kind of align with the January timeframe.
Uh-huh.
And so we answered, each of the six of us dads answered a daily prompt for a month, and so that filled the book. Um, and so I got about 3 or 4 responses in, and each day, like, I'm answering the question and I'm thinking, it takes me probably about 30 to 45 minutes to think about the question, and what my response is going to be, and to kind of get it onto paper. And
Mm-hmm.
so, I'm cognitively thinking about how I father, and really diving into like an introspective, pain of, and by pain, not like like hurt, but like a pane of glass, into the visibility of how I father. And
Mm-hmm.
so, after the third or fourth day, I had a rough day at work, man. It was a lot of meetings, a lot of just unnecessary, what I felt was unnecessary stuff come
Mhm.
up. And so by the time I got home, like I remember falling on the bed or the couch, and I was on the couch and I was just kind of like unwinding on my phone and just, doing the infinite doom scroll of social media. And my son came out of his room and is like, "Hey, you want to see this Minecraft house I just built?" And in that moment, it was probably, maybe 3 seconds, but it felt like an eternity.
Mhm.
I wanted to tell him no. I wanted to be like, you know what? I've had the worst day of my week, probably month and maybe year. I I I don't want to, honestly.
Right.
But, I started thinking about, and this is all like, nanoseconds, milliseconds. And I started thinking about how I'm writing a book on fatherhood and I'm going to tell my son, no, I don't want to see what he's built. And then I threw my phone down,
Mhm.
stood up, and like, yeah, you know what? I do want to see it. And I want to give you, constructive criticism on how to make it better. And in that moment, I felt so empowered. And had I not started down this journey of creating this book, where would my son be now? Right. And so, like,
Mhm.
so that was story number one. And that was a very significant moment, even if it was, 15 seconds in the grand sense of time.
Yeah.
The other, and this is going to be me being pretty vulnerable here, but it was again a day of just tough work. And at that point, while this point in the story, I was working from home, and so I
Mhm.
didn't have the commute to kind of like unwind. It was just like, I have my desk in my bedroom, and when I leave my bedroom and I'm done for the day, I'm in the kitchen, and it takes about 2 seconds for me to walk from my bedroom to the kitchen. And so again, it was another rough day, a lot of meetings, um, and I got pretty beat up professionally, like occupationally that day. And so I remember walking, into my son's room, and he dropped something, or he was picking on his sister or something, and it was the final straw on the camel's back, and I teed off verbally. I didn't hit him physically or anything, but I think, I don't know the definition of verbal assault, but I think I verbally assaulted him. I told him, like, like, you can't do that. And I raised my voice, and, I went off on this probably 30 to 45-second tirade. By the end, he was crying. My sister was like, or not my sister, his sister, my daughter, kind of
Mhm.
like ran into her room, and she just, turtled up. And I told him, I was like, "Hey, I love you. I'm going to work." And I left for another meeting. And while I was out, I had it was a phone call, and the phone call, of course, went poorly because I felt awful. But I couldn't help but spend the rest of that time away from the house, just feeling like absolute crap. And I couldn't help but think of ways that I would apologize to him, because there's no way to apologize. To this day, I
Yeah.
don't know how to apologize to him for that moment. But
Mhm.
and I certainly haven't forgiven myself for it. And this
Mhm.
has been months. This has probably been about a year. But I remember coming home, pulling into the driveway, sitting in my car for about a minute, like, all right, well, you got to go to apologize to your son. And I manned up. I exited the vehicle. I walked in through the garage. I went to his room. He was reading a book or whatever. And I was like, "Hey, I kind of want to talk." And he was like, "Yes, Dad, what's up?" And just chipper. And I was like, "So, Daddy was wrong earlier." And he's like, "Yeah, it's fine. It's cool." And in that moment, he had forgiven me.
Yeah.
I did not, and to this day, I still don't think I deserve his forgiveness. But
Mhm.
that's that little kid's superpower, man. The power to forgive. He will never forget. That kid remembers everything. Like, he remembers the color of the socks that I wore on a camping trip 3 years ago.
Yeah.
But that forgiveness, it's remarkable. And this was, in reminiscing on that in the book and being vulnerable, I'm hoping that that prevents another dad from teeing off on his kids
Mhm.
tomorrow or next month or next year.
Yeah, for sure. And that story, I think, resonates with so many of us. I mean, because you come home, you're tired. Um, like you said, the job has an ability of just kicking your butt, right?
Yeah.
And then you bring that with you. One of the ways I tell my fathers is to, we wear different hats, right? And before you step into that door, take that hat off at work. I used to do the same exact thing, right? My wife said, you're in lineman mode, is what she would call it. And I'd start barking orders and everything, trying to get stuff done, right?
Yeah.
And what I was doing when I was doing that is I was being super critical with all of them. And I
Mm,
was putting the job first, right, over the relationship, right? And as men, we need to put the relationship first,
absolutely.
right? And it's good to see that you recognize that and you're able to be big enough to apologize to your kid,
Yeah.
and it's good to see that your kid was reflecting something that needed to grow in you. Because what I truly believe is that our children and our spouse as well, right? They are like mirrors for what is going on inside of us,
Oh, absolutely.
or what we're lacking.
Yep.
In that
Yep.
case, that kid showed you what true forgiveness is.
Yeah. It's incredible.
Yeah.
The mirror, and that's kind of they say that a lot in the military too, is that
Hmm.
soldiers are a reflection of their leadership, and you know
Yeah.
when, when you leave every day, or when you look at yourself in the mirror when you're brushing your teeth, you think everybody knows that there's pieces of them. I'm hoping everybody knows that there's pieces of themselves that they can improve. But when you're looking at yourself in the mirror every day when you're brushing your teeth or getting ready for the day, you're just kind of thinking about how you're going to crush that day, right? Like, how am I going to succeed, and how am I going to leverage all of my, strengths
Hmm.
to be best, put my best self forward today. And it's very few and far between where we take those moments to kind of reflect on the bad stuff. How can we, what do we need to do to improve, and I would argue that a very small percentage of people in general, it's not just dads, it's not just moms, it's grandparents as well, because grandparenting is a completely different shift from parenting, right? And
Yeah.
so how can I be a better grandparent? But people, I I think most I think most don't think that way, but I wish they would. I wish people would start reflecting on their weaknesses and how they can, and you've said it in a past podcast. I listened to the Memorial Day special, and you said it great. You're only as fast as your slowest guy, right?
Hmm.
And so, like, you personally and me personally, like, we're only as strong as our greatest weakness allows us to be. And so
Hmm.
it's important to really build upon ourselves, and always, if I hope I never lose it, but I try to recommend, or to realize every single day, that there's something I can improve about myself. There's something I
Hmm.
can improve about my kids, my wife. Shoot, I can improve something, I could help my dogs improve on something, like,
Hmm.
I mean, if their behavior is inadequate, barking at the mailman or whatever, like, there's always some sort of positivity that you can propel into the world, and that
Hmm.
somebody can latch on to do the same thing, and it just percolates back to that butterfly effect, that ripple effect of dropping that stone and watching that tsunami hit on the other side.
Yeah, for sure. And paying attention, right, through the process. That's
Yeah.
one thing I've learned throughout this whole thing. Um, a good mentor friend of mine, Lyman, sits on my board, told me, he's like, pay attention when you're going through this stuff. He's like, pay attention to the little details. And I even teach that to my apprentices. All these little details that we show you since the beginning, kind of like in the military where they tell you pay attention to detail, and they
Yeah.
have you looking for commie tags and all this different stuff, right?
Yeah.
And even to where you're folding your clothes a certain way, everything that's all teaching you attention to detail, and that'll save you in the long run. And I apply that even in life. If you're paying attention to the little details while you're going through the process, whether it be in the valley or in the peaks, because life is a series of valleys and peaks, right?
Yeah.
And if you pay attention to every little thing that's going on and you see you can learn something from it, right? Um,
Absolutely.
we had a past guest. It was one of our marriage series with Alan Fisher and his wife, Carolyn. And one of the things that I took from that great podcast was that the wife, Alan had a certain way about him, right? And she didn't understand until she finally realized that the way he was because he had Asperger's,
Hmm.
right? So he was
Wow.
super, super focused. Well, it rubbed off, like she said, as him coming off as an asshole and he didn't care about the family at all. But it was just because he was super focused. And that's what helped him to become a 26-time world champion arm wrestler, right?
Wow.
But she didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah.
And one of the things she said that kept her going forward in that marriage is that even though he messed up consistently, and I think all men can say that we constantly are failing, right? In this pursuit of perfection, right?
Yeah.
And she said that kept her going in the marriage was that he never stopped trying. And she was able to recognize that because why? Because she paid attention to the details, paid attention to the process. He never stopped trying. He was messy
Yeah.
throughout their marriage, right?
Wow.
But he never stopped trying.
Yeah. I think that's, indicative of a good leader,
Yeah.
honestly, and to, everybody gets knocked down a notch. And if you're not getting knocked down a notch, you need to be, everybody, part of
Yeah.
life, part of joy is recognizing the struggle, and so yeah, man, that's it's important to just, and it's important to keep trying, but it's important
Yeah.
for your children to see that, because if
Yes.
they don't, then they won't get up when they fall down, and that's the
Mm-hmm.
last thing I want to put out into the world. And gosh, 10 years now, and boy, is this time flying. But my our children need to see that their parents continue to try,
Mm-hmm.
and although to my knowledge, we haven't been diagnosed with anything especially as significant as Asperger's, but
Mm-hmm.
it's it's they just have to continue to see that effort. and
Yeah.
and really, it's, you see it all over the place. I actually recently posted something about it on LinkedIn recently, but I came to work one day, and it was this week, and I show up, and I'm usually early. I think the military did that to me. If you're not early, you're late.
Yeah.
But I showed up early, and there just happened to be 5 or 6 other of my coworkers in the office. And I walked into, I work in IT, and I walk in the door, and there's just this increasingly loud buzzing sound that's like noticeable
Yeah.
and very out of the ordinary. And so I was like, gosh, what is that? And I'm tracking it down. Um, and I finally found it was like one of those like little battery backups for like a computer. A fuse must have blown or something, or
Uh-huh.
maybe it wasn't a fuse. But I held the power button down, and the noise went away. And so I was like, whew, because that's like headache inducing,
Yeah.
this siren that was coming out of this thing. And I couldn't help but think, like, those 5 or 6 other individuals, like, they were so blatantly disregarding that noise. And
Mm-hmm.
so in one way I admire it, right? Like, being able to just completely disregard the
Mm-hmm.
noise that surrounds us. But like, surely that noise would affect your ability to work. And so,
Mm-hmm.
like, I found it incredibly, I don't know, agitating, but also like just something to kind of percolate in my mind about, like,
Mm-hmm.
how, like, nobody else thought to seek out where this noise was coming from and to turn it off. And I think it's important. And I hope my kids do the same. That's part of doing the right thing when nobody's
Yes.
watching, right? And so, like, I can only hope, and
Mm-hmm.
also show that type of behavior and hope that they pick up on it.
Yeah, for sure. And that's that tunnel vision I talked about.
Yep,
They were
exactly.
so focused on what was going on around them, or not around them, what they're working on, that
Yeah.
they couldn't see what was going on around them. Right. And
Yeah.
when we're so focused like that, dude, we miss out in life. Think
Oh, for
about
sure.
it. When you're over here on your device, dude, and you have a perfect opportunity to spend time with your children, you're going to miss out on that, especially your baby's first steps or whatever significant event that happens in life. If you're so focused on answering an email or even just like brainless mind scrolling, like you said, through Instagram or whatever,
Yeah.
you're going to miss out on these little moments that you cannot get back. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just gonna say that, I went to a softball. My daughter was 7. She's at a softball game,
Uh-huh.
and I'm sitting there on my phone. And this is actually during the composition of this book, but I'm sitting there on my phone. She's out having a good time playing softball, but
Yeah.
like I'm sitting there on my phone, and it took a second, and I looked around. I saw other parents, and I was like, I cannot allow myself to do this. And it's like a drug. Those phones are drugs, and we're all
Yeah.
addicted. And so it was a conscious choice to put that
Mhm.
phone down and watch my daughter get a double, or watch her strike out and see how she reacts as she heads back to the dugout. Like
Mhm.
there's just so much that we all miss by not allowing ourselves to see what's in front of us. You said it, man.
Man, have you watched that movie, The Social Dilemma, on Netflix?
No, I need to, apparently.
Dude, you got to watch that, man. It talks about how they purposely target our interests and we are consumers for them, right?
Yeah.
The thing that really gripped me and I thought was pretty fascinating is they said there's two groups of people that they call users: drug addicts and people on social media. And I
Wow.
thought that blew my mind away. You know what I mean? I was like,
Yeah.
whoa, man, I'm a user, It's eye-opening, right? But
We're junkies.
yeah, we're junkies. So yeah, I definitely, you know, check that out. It's pretty awesome. It's on Netflix, I believe.
Absolutely. I definitely will.
Now, reading your story and stuff like that, I see that it has like this humorous tone, right? And you talked about stories about farting in the elevator with your kids and all these different little things, right? So how do you balance humor and serious topics in your writing?
Yeah, it's tough, and I am not a writer, and actually, and it's kind of interesting. My dad is one of the co-authors of this book, and
Oh wow.
so he's a bit of a writer. He's self-published a few books, and I've always kind of, and again, because I saw him write, all throughout his life,
Hmm.
I had this bucket list item of becoming an author, and so. I'm certainly not an author, and the other four fathers aren't much of authors either, but I think that our stories are significant, and they're significant enough that they write themselves,
Hmm.
and even, David, if you're not an author, it sounds like you've got some amazing stories that could write themselves, and
Yeah.
it's stuff that, would otherwise just be buried with us in 40, 50, 100 years, and it'll
Hmm.
it'll just go unnoticed. And I'm the goal of this book is to prevent that, and to promote our family lineage and history, so that those that come after us can leave the world in a better place than they found it. And so I think adding humor helps, helps a storyline along. I like reading stuff that has, like, humor elements, so that it's easier to remember.
Hmm. No, definitely. They say that a child's brain is most malleable whenever there's fear or an elevated type of emotion going on.
Yeah.
And I think that even holds true with us, right? So if you're using humor, like I know, like when I'm teaching my children or even teaching apprentices, if I use a little humor in it, it shows that vulnerability that I am human. I'm not this authoritative figure who's trying to get you to understand something, but hey, I'm just like you. Let's freaking break bread. And it just breaks down those barriers, right, that are developed by the perspective of teacher to student, right, for
For sure.
whatever reason. You know what I mean? Oh, that's our instructor, we gotta whatever. Or even, oh, that's dad, we can't act like that. You know what I'm saying? I want to break down those barriers. I definitely don't want to lose respect at all,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But I do want to show them that, hey man, let's have a good time. So I agree with you. Humor is important, I believe.
Yeah. And like, my wife calls me a man child all the time. I leave the seat up, or I'll leave trash in my car, and she calls me a man child. But you know I think the fact is that I am, and you are. I'm pushing 39. I'm going to be 39 in about 2 months, but I still feel like I'm 17. Mentally, I still feel young. And in
Yeah.
talking to, some seniority, and I've just had some incredible conversations, especially of late, with individuals that are my senior, but
Mm.
in their mind, mentally, they feel younger than I do,
Wow.
and so I think there's a piece of us, and I'm certainly no therapist or psychologist or anything, but I think there is a piece of us buried deep down somewhere where we still kind of have that like child mentality, where we still want to do fun things, and I still want to, eat cotton candy at the circus type deal, and I still want to have pillow fights. And man, I absolutely love a good Nerf gun fight. I will dome my kid as much as possible, but I think we all have that inner child that just wants to be let out.
Yeah.
And obviously it has to be controlled in a professional environment, in a parenting environment, but every once in a while you need that outlet, and if in my instance, if it's through writing, or your instance, and it's through dealing with subordinates that are on their way up in their journeyman journey, then so be it. But I think that inner child is something that we all should really strive to wrangle in, rein up.
Yeah, I definitely let my inner foo, I call it, come
There you
out,
go.
Well, John Christensen, we're coming up to the end of the broadcast here. What is a bit of advice that you can give to an aspiring young father that you could share?
Yeah, I would just say, whatever you're doing, if you're doing it cognitively, you're doing it, and you're doing it right. There's
Mm,
no single way, and I'm here to say that this book, it's not going to teach you the way, but it's going to teach you a way. And we kind of briefly touched on it before, but just kind of like, taking in others wisdom is can be beneficial, and if you agree with it or if you don't agree with it, then letting that kind of percolate in your mind and coming up with your way, you're not going to be wrong. And you don't need permission to be a good dad. And so I
mm,
think that that's kind of been one thing that's held me back previously, is that I needed my dad to see how good I was treating my son or daughter, or I
mhm.
needed them to see how good I was treating them, or if I was treating them poorly, but if you give yourself permission to do great things, you'll do great things.
Yeah, I like that. So as a recap, and it resonates with something I say, six one way, half a dozen the other. As long
Yeah,
as the outcome is the same, who cares how you get there, right?
exactly.
you know but once again, John, how could people reach out to you if they want to reach out to you and get your book or anything like that? I give you this opportunity now to just share with our audience real quick, if you don't
Cool.
mind.
Yeah, I appreciate it. So our website is
Mm-hmm.
village-wisdom.com. We're on Instagram at village.wisdom. And if you want to reach out to me personally, I love it. I love all the correspondence. My email is john@village-wisdom.com.
Well, right on, guys. Thank you, John, from the Show Up That Foundation. We appreciate you coming on here and sharing your wisdom, dude, and we look forward to talking to you soon.
Thanks so much.